Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my Blacadian universe. So, as the year comes to a close, like many, I've been reflecting on 2025, and it has been a very tumultuously year. I mean, to say, to summarize, I would say, um, yeah, it's just been, reflecting back. I always, as listeners, you know that I always try and find the positive side. Um, and that has been harder and harder um, these past few months and just generally over the year. So, this will be my last episode for 2025. New episodes are going to return in 2026. Wow, I can't believe it's going to be 2026 soon. So I'm going to spend this time reflecting um, on something that I've been thinking a lot about these last few months with all of you. So let's talk about it. So, as always, my friends and I, we talk about racism. It's a part of our lives. It's a part of my life. If you want to be my friend, you're going to have to talk about racism. It's something that people learn early on, regardless of their race. I talk about race and racism with my white friends um, because, yeah, it's just that's what happens when you hang around with Denise. they 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 learn. Um, and one of the things that I feel is not a universal experience growing up is learning empathy. And so I feel like the biggest difference between people that are, um, you know, not just people that are like, oh, I don't actively, am out here, hurting people of, non white people. So therefore I'm not racist. There's the difference between being that and anti-racist, people that are actively trying to end systems of oppression. The biggest difference is that they learn empathy growing up. And I feel like this is something that is missing from white households. And this is something that I found to be true in my experience. Um, but it's also something I've noticed that all of the great anti-racist equity activists preach. It always comes down to empathy. So growing up, I learned, as I had to learn as a Black girl, woman now, um, is that I will say woman. It's so funny because I'm like a girl, like I'm like, woman. Uh, I always correct people when they refer to grown people as, anyways. The point is, if you identify as a woman, you should be called as such. Anyways, that's a whole other conversation. But the point is, growing up as a Black person, I had to learn that I am a human being, that I'm worthy of dignity, of love, all of the things that come along with a human experience. Because my parents knew that I was going to be bombarded with messages of the fact that I don't deserve those things. And so it was an active part of my education, was that I should love myself. And no matter what anybody else tells me, Black people, me as a Black person, deserve all the things, of course. And in addition to that, and this is the key piece here, I wasn't just taught that I deserve it as a Black person. I was taught that all people deserve it, even white people. That's right. There's a lot of talk now about how, there's like this backlash or this belief that somehow, there's like this conversation going around where, Black people are hating on white people. We don't spend our energy that way, at least the Black people I know in my circle, in my world. So that's what I was taught. I was taught that, and I believe that. And so one of those critical things that I've learned is that lesson of loving yourself and believing that everybody is deserving of that equity and that humane humanity experience is not universal. There are people that believe, white people that believe that they are good people, that are still being taught this idea, for lack of a better word, of charity, that they are superior and they have to use that superiority for good. And that's very different than saying using your privilege for good, understanding that the world is built in a way that you will benefit in this way. And so you have to use that privilege to dismantle these systems so that people can see that true equity. There's people that truly believe that they have more, not from, the evils of colonization and white supremacy, but because they deserve it, because of some inherent superiority. And they don't want to acknowledge that truth. And so there's a lot of dancing around of how they're good people, but they fundamentally cannot reconcile with the fact that they ultimately believe in white superiority. So when I say that these lessons are not taught, historically back in the day when, racism was more overt, we, see the history of, white children going to the lynchings of Black people. This was like a family affair. Could you imagine what lessons that imparts on someone, that this is entertainment? You cannot believe that person, that you are witnessing the end of their life. You cannot see them as the same as you and, eat popcorn while you're watching them getting murdered. How does that happen? So, those are the kinds of experiences that are part of, I'm going to say it, white culture in our very recent history. There are, later on in history, we see it with the children being marching in the streets, being enraged at Black children trying to go to school. You see that in the hatred coming out in segregation. People, you know, the images, from the Little Rock, just like they had like just Black babies in like coffins, like just disturbing, disgusting things. Like they were not taught that these are good people. That lesson didn't go both ways. That lesson of empathy. This is recent history. Those people are still like maybe just retiring now in their 60s. That's what they have been taught. They weren't taught that we were human. These people are in our communities, in our active communities right now. And, just because the laws have changed, it doesn't change the fact that one generation ago, these people were saying that Black people weren't deserving of being treated like a human being. So all of that to say, my lesson that I've learned from this, because we all know this, we all know that racism is real, but when you lack empathy, and I think this is what 2025 has really highlighted, is when you lack empathy for others, you suffer from it. And so, as I was saying, all of the great anti-racist activists, so like Martin Luther King, Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, all of them, I've just found that there's this common thread throughout, which is it diminishes you. Of course, as Black people, as these activists were as Black people, they were obviously, wanting equality for themselves, for their community, for others that weren't white. Of course, they wanted that too, but they were saying, don't do it just for us, because obviously we're human beings and we're deserving of humane treatment. That's without saying, well, it should be without saying, but they're saying you lose too. When you don't have empathy, you're losing out. You're losing out from the knowledge that we have. You're losing out from our culture, although appropriation is rampant. People love to um, pick and harvest um, the aspects of, many cultures that they like. Um, but, you're losing out. You are not getting the experience of our knowledge, of our people, of our stories, of our everything. A lot of people, were talking about not being partaking. If you really want separation, then that means giving up the things, like not eating in ethnic restaurants anymore. If that's truly what you want, it means if you truly want that separation, your life will be less than. I think that's the message that was trying to be conveyed, was that you're losing out when you don't open yourselves up to other people. It stops you. Lacking empathy stops you from experiencing so many different facets of life, and it puts you in a cage. It puts you in a box. It limits your knowledge of the world, and it makes your experience of the world very, very small and limited and frankly terrible. And so when you're afraid of Black people, when you've been told that you cannot leave your home, you cannot, associate in certain areas, that this is a scary place to go, all of the things. If you just allow racism to tell you those things without trying to experiencing them from yourself, so you can, read about, the culinary wonders of the world, but don't you want to taste those flavors for yourself? When you read from the book of racism, you stop yourself from just experiencing what you could be experiencing. You're limited. And when, there's been lots of also talks this year as well on how people with low intelligence are racist. And that's part of it too. When you're not allowing yourself to have a diversity of thought from many different minds, of course you're going to be limited in your thoughts as well. It hurts you to not be empathetic to others, to not open yourself to other experiences. It just does. There is no way you can agree and you can disagree, but what you shouldn't be doing is limiting yourself in that way. Find out for yourself, and I think a lot of people would be better for it. And one of the ills and the powers of racism is it makes people too afraid to venture out. Because once you do, and you open yourself up to that diverse thought, you'll realize that you were wrong. There's power in only getting your information from one source that tells you one story, one message, all the same thing. It's comforting for some, but it is damaging when that message is, we have to keep everything the same. We have to keep hating. You have to be afraid of people that don't look like you. Those are all things that are putting you in a cage for a very sad, unfulfilled, and, dare I say it, boring life. So as I'm walking into 2026, I'm taking that lesson with me, which is to keep learning, to keep growing, to always be willing to experience things and not letting my fear stop me. That's what I'm taking away from 2025. And rest, dear God, rest. Definitely taking some rest so that I can continue fighting the good fight in 2026, because it's worth fighting for, because yeah, I'm always going to believe in the best of people. So thank you, as always, so much for listening. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you're taking into 2026, what you're hopeful for in this new year. Please rest. Take care of yourself. And I will see you all in 2026. Rest up and let's continue, you know, taking care of ourselves and fighting the good fight. Talk to you next time.